Evolutionary podcast coming your way, guys. What is up? Stevesmi here and Rick in the house. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, Steve? What's up, guys? How's everybody doing out there?
This is episode 312, guys. We're steaming right along. Today we're going to talk about Nolvadex. Nolvadex is a very, very well-known drug. The trade name is Nolvadex. The drug itself is called Tamoxifen citrate. It's one of the most common essential drugs in the world. It's under the WHO, World Health Organization's list of essential medicines because of its many essential different uses. Now, although some guys treat it as an aromatase inhibitor, it's actually a SERM, which is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. So we're going to talk about this very, very popular and well-known drug that we use in bodybuilding and with our steroid cycles and PCT. And we're going to talk about how to use it and all about it. But first, we like to discuss the history a little bit, because knowing the history of where these drugs came from is very, very fascinating, kind of gives you an idea, because a lot of people automatically assume that everything we talk about is just for bodybuilders, and it's usually not the case. Usually these are things that were developed for other reasons, but we have through knowledge and through networking, have figured out other ways to use them to our advantage in the bodybuilding world. So, Rick, tell us a little bit about the history of Nolvadex.
Nolvadex was developed around the 1950s, and it was first developed as a drug, as a contraceptive drug, basically, sort of a morning after pill. But during testing, they found that women were ovulating when they were receiving Nolvadex. So they abandoned Nolvadex as a contraceptive, obviously, so it was making women ovulate. And they tried to bring it to market as a fertility drug, but it wasn't that great at doing that either. It lost out to drugs like Clomid. Clomid was also developed around this time. So Nolvadex just wasn't that effective. However, they did find that Nolvadex had an effect on females with breast cancer. And so it began to be used as a breast cancer medication around the 1980s. And it really just become like the standard of cancer treatment for women when they're first diagnosed. It's basically an estrogen receptor antagonist, which means that it'll actually go and sit on the estrogen receptor, but not create a signal, not create any stimuli at the cell. But it does keep out the real estrogen that would attach to that estrogen receptor and actually create a signal. So around the late 1980s, early 90s, Dan Duchaine, famous bodybuilding writer, he was the first guy to kind of put two and two together and figure out that Nolvadex could be used as gyno prevention and gyno treatment for guys on steroids. See, before Dan Duchaine figured out Nolvadex could carry over to use by men on steroids, the best we could do was take some Mastron with your cycle. Before Dan Duchaine figured out Tamoxifen could be used to actually treat Gynecomastia from steroids, guys used to just use Mastron or Proviron with their cycle. And Nolvadex is still being used to this day. Clomid is also another SERM. These are both SERMs. These are selective estrogen receptor modulators. Now, Clomid, although in the same class of drugs, it works differently. It doesn't do much to help you prevent gynecomastia, but it does help you as a steroid user in other ways to recover from a steroid cycle. However, it is in the same class of drugs as Nolvadex, created around the same time as Nolvadex, both of those. And both are still used to this day by both bodybuilders on steroids and women who are suffering from cancer are still using Tamoxifen today to help the treatment of it.
Yeah, we all know someone with breast cancer. Breast cancer is extremely, almost normal nowadays due to a lot of factors. So we all know a woman, and the women that I've known that have had breast cancer, they've been on Nolvadex for 3 to 5 years afterwards. And that helps prevent, because remember, breast cancer and all cancers really are stimulated by a rise in estrogen. As we alluded to, some of the old-time gurus like Dan Duchaine and stuff came up with the idea to use it. And now back in the late 80s, 90s, you were to ask some of the today, and you ask them, what do you use on cycle for estrogen? They would say, hey, I use Nolvadex on cycle for estrogen. But the thing is, now we're in 2020. So if you come on the forum and you say you want to use Nolvadex on cycle, most everybody on our forums, the vets and the moderators, are going to be like, whoa. You should use an aromatase inhibitor. But you got to keep in mind, then, late 80s, early 90s, aromatase inhibitors weren't really known about. And Aromasin that wasn't even around at that time. Aromasin is one of the more modern AIs, or if not the most modern AI. So now, obviously, it's much more beneficial to use Aromasin on cycle as an aromatase inhibitor, not using Nolvadex, which is a SERM. So, how do we use body? But before we kind of get into the best way, Rick, you've been on the forums a long time. Have you noticed that trend where guys more in the 90s were using Nolvadex on cycle for estrogen, and then now they're using Arimidex or Aromasin as an AI? But what's your take on that? Do you think that transition was beneficial to bodybuilding, or do you think?
When it comes to the use of Nolvadex, my first post on the forums was late 1999, early 2000. And back then, all you could find was Nolvadex. And that was godsend. That was a new thing. That was something that was adopted and used in the last 10 years for steroid users by the time I arrived on the scene. Less than 10 years, actually. The guys had been using Nolvadex. So that was the new thing, the new thing to do at the time that I started using. Arimidex was the first new anti-estrogen to come out. When I first started using steroids around year 2000, 2001, the only thing you could use as an anti-estrogen was Masteron Provarin, Tamoxifen, obviously. And Clomid was not regarded as much of an anti-estrogen, more as a post-cycle therapy drug. And it wasn't until about the year 2004, 2003, about 2002, 2003, that you really started to see Arimidex around. And when Arimidex first came out, a 1 milligram tablet of Arimidex, you were going to pay over $10, $15 for it. This is human grade Arimidex that you can buy at the time. It really wasn't until mid to late 2000s that we started to get some of the other newer anti-estrogens being adopted into use, like Aromasin, Letrozole. The Letra and Aromasin took a good while later after Arimidex. Now, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think you have more versatility now. I'm prone to gynecomastia. I had some hard glands under my nipples as a teenager. So I know I'm prone to it. So I do my best. I take a Tamoxifen with every single cycle, just as a precaution. And it's kept me from continuing to get it. I've been going on now into my, I'm about to be 40 now. Been using steroids on and off for about 20 years here and there, and haven't had any issues with my nipples getting bigger or anything like that.
You into those hard nipples, huh, Rick? You into those hard nipples? Or you like them soft?
Talking about nipples, by the way, guys, and Steve, you especially, buddy, don't let your girl play with your nipples. It'll stimulate the glands there, and you're gonna create more receptors, and it's just stimulating your nipples. You'll make yourself more prone to gynecomastia than not. So don't let your chick play with your nipples. Probably not a good idea.
Exactly.
Especially if you're
especially
if you're prone
to
gynecomastia.
I hate that. I hate women who like to play with your nipples. I freaking hate that. you know, because that's like their thing. They got this little what's it called when they're into something?
Yeah,
Like little fetish. They like to play with the nipples. I'm like, please just don't touch them.
I'm
I don't
cool.
want to
I'm
be
cool with, you
lactating.
know, I'm cool getting. I'm cool when a chick kisses my chest, a little kiss here and there, but ain't none of that sucking stuff. You know.
You gonna get like one of those rings on your nipples?
You get
No.
weren't you the guy talking about getting a nose ring and changing your name to Xerxes like 3 podcasts?
I'm gonna get. I'm gonna get. I'm gonna get a face tattoo on my nose.
You have to get now. You got to get the nipple rings. So you have little chains coming down from the nose next to your nipple rings. Nobody's gonna believe you're a real Xerxes if you don't got it like that. It's all got to be like yellow gold, really garnish.
Yeah, I can't. I can't imagine.
What would your parents say if you walked in there with like a big tattoo on your arm?
They'd probably be like, ugh.
Dude, they'd say, "Don't ever come back to this house. My son is dead."
Yeah.
All right. So,
yeah, let's talk about PCT for Nolvadex. So, really, I think the best way to use Nolvadex is during a post-cycle therapy. So, post-cycle therapy, guys, really the purpose of post-cycle therapy is to give you a soft landing when you come off cycle. And this is an off-label use for Nolvadex, but guys have been doing this for a while now, and they came up with this idea. I would love to know who's the true guy who came up with this idea back in the late 80s or 90s to use Nolvadex and PCT, because it's actually a really good idea, and I'll tell you why. Because it's a SERM, it blocks estrogen from feedbacking. So what happens is when you're taking it, it's going to kind of manipulate your HPTA. It's going to manipulate your pituitary glands into producing LH, which is luteinizing hormone, and that's going to stimulate your Leydig cells into producing testosterone. So you start taking the Nolvadex during PCT, you actually manipulate your HPTA, you know, into firing up. So this is a really good way to kind of soften your landing when you come off. So that's why you see guys use Nolvadex during a post-cycle therapy. Now, we can debate, you know, all the other things, but one of the things that you guys cannot do is expect just to throw tons of Nolvadex at your body and expect that you're going to recover like magic. That's just not the way it works. Your own body has to recover, but the Nolvadex just happens to help soften the landing. So if you take someone who's been shut down for years, they're on TRT, and they say, you know, I'm going to come off TRT and I'm just going to take some Nolvadex, and like magic, I'm going to recover. Well, they're in for a rude awakening, because what happens is the Nolvadex is going to possibly, you know, boost your LH, boost your testosterone levels temporarily, but then when you stop taking it, and the more you take it over time, the less effect it's going to have to be. So what's going to happen is you may get a boost initially, and then you'll just crash back down, because essentially your HPTA is just dormant and dead. And you're probably going to have to be on TRT the rest of your life, because recovery is going to be very difficult. So you don't want to get yourself into that mess. And the way you don't get yourself into that mess, guys, is by cycling steroids correctly. Time on, time off, at least time on, time off, time on. And then you run the Nolvadex and PCT in conjunction with a natural testosterone booster, and that'll give you the best chance to get a soft landing so you don't crash. And then you gradually wean off the Nolvadex, and then you can continue using a natural testosterone booster. I like N2 Generate ES Extra Strength. That's my testosterone booster that I recommend to all my clients. So I'll use that with the Nolvadex, 10 to 20 milligrams every day or every other day. There's no need to run 40 or 60 or 80 or 100 like some people say. Run it conservatively, and run it with your testosterone booster with your N2 Generate. And then you stop taking the Nolvadex after about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on your cycle. And then you continue taking that N2 Generate for another 4 to 6 weeks. And that's a really, really good basic PCT that you can add to as you go along. But that's a basic PCT that seems to work really well on most guys, unless you completely trash your HPTA where it's not going to recover. So, you know, that's where the Nolvadex really, really shines, in my opinion. You know, so Rick, what's your way of running PCT with Nolvadex, or do you prefer another SERM?
Well, I use Nolvadex on cycle. I use it coming off a cycle. Anytime that I know that I have estrogens flowing through my body more than naturally, I use it just as a block to create a barrier between estrogens and the glands under my nipples, which is what I'm concerned about. As far as actual recovery, I find Clomid to just be much better for recovery. Just recovery alone, Clomid much better if you're talking about selective estrogen receptor modulators, right? So Clomid is the best in that category. Nolvadex, again, is great, I find, for specifically preventing gynecomastia, but it won't prevent any of the other estrogen side effects. You're still going to get some bloating. You're still going to have a little bit of mood issues and stuff here and there. Because Nolvadex, tamoxifen, will block very effectively the estrogen receptors under your nipples, in those glands and those cells under your nipples. But it's not that great at doing it in other tissues in the body. So other tissues in the body that control other functions in the body are going to still be affected by estrogen. This is why, if you want to not suffer any water retention or some of these other estrogen side effects, the best way is to go with something like Aromacin. That's going to prevent the conversion altogether, so your estrogen levels never rise. Because Nolvadex will block the estrogen out of receptors, but it won't do anything for the actual amount of estrogen that's still flowing in your body. Your body's still going to make quite a bit of estrogen when you're injecting steroids that can aromatize, and Nolvadex does nothing for that. You have to go with something like Arimidex, Arimistane, Aromacin. Those are the ones that are going to help you lower overall estrogen levels. And look, some guys won't even use Nolvadex at all now because Aromacin is just good enough. They don't need Nolvadex to specifically block estrogen out of the glands in your nipples, because just lowering overall estrogen levels to a normal level is enough. It's enough, and there is no additional blocking that is needed. So it really depends on the guy. There's plenty of options to keep estrogen under control, to come back from suppression after a cycle. And Nolvadex is just one. And again, in my personal situation, when I had actual gyno as a kid without ever touching steroids, I had a little bit, and then it went away as I got older. I don't want it to come back, so I keep Nolvadex on hand, and I use it pretty much all the time that I'm on something.
All right, so Rick, tell us about gynecomastia. Let's say you're on halfway through your cycle, and gynecomastia just comes on. Whether you did it right or did it wrong is not really the point. The point is you're in a mess right now. You got a gynecomastia come on. Would you come off the steroids and start using Nolvadex? Would you stack something with Nolvadex? How much Nolvadex? Et cetera, et cetera. Give your advice on this. Let's say you're halfway through cycle and you get the estrogen.
Yeah, it's a very typical newbie move to just quit your cycle when you have a side effect that starts up. Look, I'm writing it out. No matter what happens, unless it's something real critical, I'll just find an answer for it. I'm old school like that. So no, if you get a little bit of nipples itching, if gynecomastia is coming on, then just crack open your box of Nolvadex or your bottle of Nolvadex, as you should have had on hand before you started your cycle, and start taking it, and you should be able to keep riding the cycle out. If you're on injectables, let's say you're shooting testosterone natate, and that is what actually, and the testosterone natate is what actually gave you the gynecomastia. If you start taking Nolvadex today, about 3 days from now, you'll know just how good that Nolvadex is going to work for you. And 3 days from now, the steroid is still not even out of your system. So it's kind of not worth it to stop your cycle if you've already taken care of the symptom. So no, you don't stop a cycle because of a little bit of gyno. No, you get ready for this stuff. Crack open your bottle of Nolvadex and go. That's all you need. If your Nolvadex won't take care of that gyno, then something crazy is going on. Something really weird, or your stuff might be bunk.
All right, what about full-fledged gyno? You're off cycle, you got full-fledged gyno. You didn't have it before.
Jeez, the only stuff that we know that reverses gyno to that degree is letrozole and cardio, right? Letrozole and weight loss. Am I correct, Steve, or am I not up with the times? But I mean, Letro and I guess I mean, Letro is it's from what I understand, if it's gotten that far to gyno, Letro is the only thing that's really going to bring it back. Wouldn't you agree, Steve, that Nolvadex can work preventively, and Nolvadex can work if your nipples are, if you just have a little bit of hard mass under there, the Nolvadex will actually take care of that hard mass. But if you have full blown out gyno, you're not just going to reverse it with Nolvadex. You're looking at that point, maybe Letro can help you, and if you can't do it with Femara, with Letro, then you're going to have to get surgery. But it's, once you have full-fledged gyno, the only thing that's really going to do it for you is Femara, is Letrozole.
Yeah, I'd give it an honest shot. I'd run the anti-gyno stack, which is on our forum, evolution.org, and it's a combination Nolvadex and Letro together. I would give that an honest shot before resorting to the surgery.
And weight loss. And weight loss. One way to really push that gyno loss is you gotta be losing fat. If you're just throwing Letro and Nolvadex on, and you're not trying to lose weight, you're gonna have the glands under there are going to lose that density, and they're gonna get softer as you use the anti-estrogens. But to actually get rid of the fat, you gotta burn it out. Your Inflame. We have our Your Inflame product, which is basically a topical fat burner. You can apply the Your Inflame right on your nipples as you are doing your cardio, as you're trying to lose some body fat, as you're taking the anti-estrogens, and it'll work great. I mean, it'll be a great gynecomastia reversal protocol if you try that, Electro, Nova, and the Your Inflame together. Then Your Inflame goes right on the spot and helps you burn that fat. Your Inflame won't do much for the actual estrogen at the level of the glands, but when it comes to actually helping burn the fats under the nipple, they'll be very, very effective. You use it consistently every day.
All right, guys. So, Nolvadex, one of the cheapest drugs out there that we use in bodybuilding. I mean, you can buy a whole PCT of, Nolvadex dosage, dose it, whatever, and it's going to run you $50 or less. So really, really cheap drug. And why is that, Rick, that it's so cheap, you think?
It's been around for a long time. It's quite easy to make. And yeah, I think it's a demand issue. It's one of the most widely used drugs in the world. I mean, it's been the standard go-to treatment for breast cancer across the world now since the last 30 years. I mean, it's been a long time it's been used. So it's very, very cheap, widely available. And apparently it's a fairly simple compound to make.
All right, guys. Yeah, Nolvadex. It's a hell of a drug, and a lot of guys use it. So hopefully you guys learned a lot on this. Anything you want to add, Rick, before we
dosing. How much do you usually use, Steve, when you're using it?
Well, I mentioned earlier on the podcast for PCT, I like 10 to 20 milligrams, 4 to 6 weeks during PCT. When you come off steroids, wait a couple weeks for the esters to kind of clear if you're using long esters, 2 to 3 weeks. And then you run it 4 to 6 weeks along with a strong testosterone booster. So, but if you're using it for gynecomastia, I would, throw the kitchen sink at the situation. I'd be running it much higher, up to even 80 milligrams a day. Really, you're going to feel like shit running Nolvadex at high dosages, but it's going to make you feel like shit for a little bit. But that's better than having to be fit for a bra or having to have surgery. So I'd give it an honest shot at a high dosage. Side effects, before we sign off, we really have to talk about that. Rick, you've used Nolvadex before. What kind of side effects do you remember getting on it? Because I sure as hell remember side effects.
I actually haven't had a lot of side effects myself from using Nolvadex. It's very effective for me at a very low dosage. I mean, 10, 15, 20 mgs on it, and I'm fine. It keeps me well. And I don't think I could really report any specific side effects that I really, really felt on Nova that I felt without it. What have you felt, buddy?
Well, I've used it first couple cycles I did, really got some, aggressive advice, obviously. I think back in the day, guys on forums would give a lot more aggressive advice than they do today. And I was taking maybe 40, 50, 60 milligrams a day. So I'd get basically, it hit my libido. It made me kind of moody. it kind of, did some stuff that really made me think that I was probably dropping my estrogen too much from using it. So the typical low estrogen side effects of the moodiness and the low libido and stuff like that, that's the side effects I got. But like you, running it at a proper dosage, like I tell my clients, and stacking it with a strong testosterone booster, those side effects are going to be minimalized. So if you find yourself getting side effects from Nolvadex, you're probably running it too high, and you're probably not running a strong testosterone booster like Into Generate with it. So if you do those two things, you should be good to go. And those side effects are temporary anyway, but you really don't want to get those side effects, especially during PCT, because you're not going to want a PCT again, and you're just going to want to stay on. So it kind of defeats the purpose to feel like shit during PCT. It's just not necessary. It's fool's gold.
Yeah, you're right. I've seen guys on the forums report all those side effects you're speaking about. I personally haven't had them. I run my stuff properly, and the guys that I work with, I make sure to have them use all these compounds in the right way, so you don't have a weird side effects from it. But yeah, I mean, I was almost forgetting that if you abuse it, if you don't use it properly, you're gonna have some side effects with Nolvadex. It just comes with the territory. It's very effective at what it does, but it'll also cause some side effects as well.
All right, guys, look, we covered everything with Nolvadex. Amazing drugs, helped a lot of people over the years, helped a lot of females with not get cancer come back. It's helped a lot of bodybuilders during PCT, soften the landing. So check it out, evolutionary.org. We got more about it on forums. For Stevesmi and Rink, another episode of Evolutionary Radio. Check out our next episode next week. We hope to see you there.
Have a good one, Steve. Have a good one, guys.
Guys, this is the required legal disclaimer. We are only sharing our experience from years of steroid use. We are not doctors, and none of what we say should be regarded as medical advice. Always check with your doctor before taking any drugs or starting any training program.